so let's kick off here. It is now top of the hour. This will be about N-Central upgrades. The marketing around this is unleash the power of your N-Central, elevate your experience with an N-Central server upgrade, and we're also going to be doing a year-end review, okay, so of 2023. So let's begin here. Like all boot camps and webinars I do, I always do a little legal disclaimer. This content may contain and will contain forward-looking statements regarding future product plans and development efforts. What that basically means is I'm not the EVP of our product team. I don't make decisions around what comes out and when. So when I talk about something that might be coming in the future, take that as a loose decision because product plans and priorities do change. So who am I? My name is Jason Murphy. I'm one of the head nerds here at Enable, former sales engineer for about 5 years. I was then the security and technology leader of a MSP, a very big MSP, a CRN top 20. I then left them to go to a verticalized MSP that was focused on healthcare. And then I came back as a head nerd, and primarily I'm focused on things like PSA integration or IT service management, IT operations, automation, but I've been using N-Central for over a decade. With me today, she isn't here right now, but hopefully she'll join very soon. Her name is Whitney Morgan. She's one of our partners. She comes from an MSP called CSI. Whitney has about 20 years of support experience. She is responsible for about 15,000 devices in her N-Central. She manages 2 people who do things like automation and some of the management tasks. But she's also a very close partner of ours who keeps us informed around any potential bugs or features, gives us feedback, those kinds of things. So welcome, Whitney. With me today as well is Sebastian. Sebastian Brown is a good friend of mine, so I asked him to be here as well. He's a super elite partner from Miken Technologies. Sebastian is focused on things like customer success, and he is the help desk manager at Miken for now over 5 years. He's led various projects for them, including orchestration of back-end migrations, hardware solutions, and has been using N-Central for about 10 years. Now, why is it important to upgrade? Okay, why? Now, I'm going to read this, but I'm also going to ask Sebastian a couple questions around this as well. I didn't jot any of this down. I didn't kind of pre-question anything. I'm just going to kind of spitball. I want to make this as interactive as possible. I don't want to keep Sebastian, flat-footed or anything like that, but I know it's one of those things where he has a lot of experience in this. As super elite partners, myself working for a very large MSP, and also Sebastian at Miken, things can go wrong, and there are certain things we need to do to be able to ensure success. And that is always kind of the concern around N-Central upgrades. Is it going to be successful? Can I move on with my day and just recognize the new feature? Well, you can do that in most cases, but there are some things that I do recommend as best practices. Now, why is it important to upgrade? Of course, you're going to get things like new features. Every release, we are going to provide you with new features. Bug fixes. Also, it's one of those things that whenever your coding changes with the N-Central product, sometimes those changes do affect other components or other areas of the product. So we're always having to fix those bugs. Security updates. With 23.9, for example, there was a particular CVE that we addressed. Agent and probe stability. We are enhancing our agents. We are making changes to these agents so they work and perform better, that there's more stability. And of course, performance enhancements. In the back end of N-Central, you don't always get to see N-Central's appliance. You throw it into a VM or it's hosted by Enable, but there are performance enhancements that we are doing. For example, I believe it was in 23.5 or 6, we made some changes in terms of how the left-hand navigation pane actually performs and how it actually works. Now, my question to you, Sebastian, when you do an upgrade, what are some of the things that you recognize as wanting to perform that upgrade? Like, what is the impetus for you to do an upgrade?
I believe just going through the release notes and seeing what features are available. I know being a part of the Super Elite, we get to know a lot of the features that are coming down the pipeline.
Mhm.
So seeing one that I've been really interested in is really nice to see. But then also just the bug fixes that we've been having. We put in a ticket with support, and then support gives us back a little bug report number, and then seeing those in the release notes is really helpful for us to be like, yeah, we've been affected by this. We need to upgrade to this version.
Right, right. And that is important. I've had many conversations with partners like you, Pre-J, other partners that I work with very closely with. And sometimes that is hard to track, right? Because you're seeing these bugs in Central. Are they being addressed in January, March, June, July, what have you? So I completely recognize that, with Central upgrades comes bug fixes, but also tracking them when you are logging them is sometimes a very manual process. And that's something that I kind of want to address in 2024. Now, there are common upgrade blockers, right? There are reasons why, Sebastian, for example, pick on Sebastian, of course, may not want to upgrade. What are those blockers? Okay, so what has prevented you from upgrading in the past? Things like failed upgrades. If you've done an upgrade and it hasn't worked and it's reverted back to the old version, or a poor upgrade experience. Sometimes you expect that Central upgrade to take, half an hour, an hour. And sometimes with these big feature releases, they can take longer. They can take, up to sometimes 2 hours, I've seen. It scares you, right? With Central upgrades comes agent upgrades, right? So we're updating not only the Central build, but also those agents. And that might give you some discomfort. You have to sometimes schedule this after hours, right? Nobody really wants to work at 9 or 10 or 11 p.m. It's one of those things where you may want to schedule that after hours. But again, change management is important. I don't have the time to do these upgrades every month, right? And I completely understand that. However, and I'll go through some of these best practices as we go through, is that if you set yourself up for success, it makes things so much easier. Okay. It's not schedulable. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just grab the upgrade and let it sit there? You could even, kick it off at 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. and then maybe set an alarm clock for 5, right? To see if everything's working. So I completely recognize that. They're FTP backups. You have to grab things from another data source somewhere else. You have to download it to your computer, whatever it may be. But it is those mechanics that sometimes take a little bit longer. Sometimes these Central upgrades can be many gigabytes in size too. So depending on your internet connection, it can actually take a little while. And you're always kind of worried about, poor agent and probe upgrades. Well, we're going to kind of address that as we go through. Now, first things first, just asking Sebastian, have you ever had a failed upgrade? And if so, what did you do?
We haven't had a failed upgrade, but first I'll say a lot of these upgrade blockers are honestly just the same blockers that we see with Windows updates. Everything here can happen with a Windows update, and it's the same thing we're scared about with Windows updates. But as you say with Windows updates, backups are key, and knowing what's actually happening is always nice to know what's going to be breaking, what's changed. But with a failed upgrade, honestly, what we've done in the past is take a snapshot of the VM with our VM software and do the upgrade. If anything fails, anything broken, or there's a new bug that we just can't work past, we repair that snapshot instead of using the FTP backup.
Right. And, when you're doing those kinds of backups, are you using like a third-party software to do those kind of snapshots? Or are you relying on like Hyper-V? Like how can you describe that part?
Our servers are hosted in Azure, so we use the Azure snapshot feature.
Good. Awesome. And have you ever had to do that portion in terms of that restore?
Yes, we have. I think back in version 22 something, we had a failed upgrade, and it failed reverting back to the old version as well. So we ended up having to use a snapshot. But after that, we haven't had too many issues.
Right. I mean, it's typically. I mean, I've been running Central for 10 years. I can remember twice where something like that has happened. That is kind of like what I would describe as a kind of a catastrophic failure, right? Like, yes, you have a backup, but you're not able to restore, or you're not kind of set up, that is where you're typically logging an emergency support case or getting with support. So have you ever had to kind of involve support in one of those situations?
Not that I remember. You know, it's only happened one time that I know of. So we haven't logged a support case, but we did log a support case after the fact, after we were back up and running, to let them know something was going on.
Yeah, and that is actually really important. You know, I remember, I forget the build, but we released, I think it was not last year, but the year before, it was 22X, where we released a build in terms of GA. And we, of course, we always test, we do QA, we have automated test scripts. We have people that do their own upgrades, but people use different hardware. There's a lot of reasons why, you know, upgrades will fail. But it was one of those things, we caught it very early, and we were able to pull that build, get it fixed within a couple days, and re-release it back into the mainstream GA. Now, one thing I do want to show you really quickly is that when I do N-central upgrades, you know, I'll log in as product admin, and of course, in 23.8 or 23.9, forget which build, we have now actually pulled the enable admin console, which I'll talk a little bit later, back into the N-central main UI. So what you're going to do is you're going to come down here into system settings. You're going to see where it says N-central server. And from here, when you do an upgrade, you typically download that upgrade, or you might see it located right here. And depending on how long, and what you're going to be able to do is set up your email and then push that upgrade. Simply, select the upgrade and install. Now, there's things I personally do in terms of best practice to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success. First and foremost, I'll go to administration at the system level. And what I'll do, you can even do this at the SO level, but I typically, because I'm already logged in as product admin, will do this for, you know, either multiple SOs or your single SO. So I will do it from system, and then I'll come into defaults. From here, what I'll do is I will go into, where are you here? Agent and probe settings. And then what I'm going to do is under upgrades, I'm going to have these set to never, okay? And this is a best practice step that you do before the upgrade. What I will do is propagate this all the way down. I will not choose this option. There's no way I want to reboot devices if necessary. However, I will choose these two options in terms of propagation, because we're going to propagate that all the way down to all the other customers. And then I will click save. Why? Why do I do this? And that is because if the N-central upgrade, the actual appliance upgrade, fails, well, the agents remain in the same version. So if I do a revert back from 23.9 to 23.8, just say I want to kind of get things up and running and try again another time, well, then those agents haven't upgraded, right? For whatever reason, okay? So, or, you know, the other best practice I do is once I've upgraded to my latest version, I will then come into either my favorite customer or a test customer. I'll just pick on Company Corp here. And then what I will do is then I will select these devices in terms of a test, and then I will tell them to upgrade. Okay, so I will say now and save. I'll come back probably a half hour later and see how, you know, these devices have upgraded. You know, have all of the agent versions changed. Now, my colleague Mark has a lot of, you know, lab devices that haven't upgraded here, but, you know, it is what it is. So that's one thing I will do as a test. I will kind of segment my testing on production. Now, another best practice is, and maybe Sebastian, you can describe this process. When you do upgrades, do you do this in production, or you do this in an NFR, a not for resale server?
We have an NFR that we test all of our updates in. We get release candidates from N-central, and we test those usually for a week or so before they go GA. And then usually by then we know if it's pushable to production.
Okay. Good. And with your RC builds, because I know you're in our beta group, And if you are interested in becoming a beta tester or one of our beta partners, you can also send me an email. I'll give you the email at the end of this webinar. But my question to you is, when you do these testings, what are some of the things that you're looking for? Obviously, has the N-Central server upgraded, but what are some of the other things that you're typically poking at?
Typically, I'm poking at what's in the release notes. So if something has changed in the release notes, I'm going to go and test that feature, or I'm going to test maybe something that adjacent to it. So if you updated the My Links stuff, like there was a bunch of changes with the My Links, updating that. So I got to go test that and see if those are still functioning the way they should. And if not, I'm going to log a support case so that we can get it fixed before it goes GA.
Right. Typical stuff. You're going to cross-reference release notes back into what has obviously changed in the build, and kind of stare and compare and do some testing on that stuff. That's awesome. Cool. Now, what I also want to do is talk about the upgrade path. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because we do have a lot of partners that, for whatever reason, aren't even in a 2023 version. There are, I forget how many hundred, there's not many, I shouldn't say there's a lot of you, but there are some partners still in 22.x. So we want to kind of get you into, the more modern N-Central, but sometimes people ask me the question, like, if I'm in 22.3 or 22.7, how do I get to 23.9? Well, that's a great question. My first question, or my first answer, would be, one, you can simply ask support. One, you can come into Slack and ask that question. Either myself or any one of our partners can answer that for you, because they're just known upgrade paths, right? Or what you can do is you can come into our documentation under user guides, and you're going to see upgrade paths. Simply search for that, and you will typically get an upgrade path to the versions below. As you can see here with 23.8, you've got 23.4, 23.7. But there's a cutoff. If you're on 23 or 22.x, well, it's not listed here. How are you going to do this? There may be another build you need in between. Have you ever seen that before? Have you ever had that happen before, Sebastian?
Yeah, there's a couple of builds that we've been on where it's like you have to do intermediate builds to upgrade to the latest.
And how did you figure that part
out? Through support. I contacted support and asked them because I didn't see it directly here on the upgrade path. And they're like, oh, you need this hotfix to go forward.
And I should, preface, the reason why you had to contact support is that we didn't have this before. So Correct. It was one of the things that a lot of our partners have pushed for, is that, okay, if I'm on any build, I need to know what that upgrade path is, right? So if I'm on an older build, if I'm on the build before, I need to know what that path looks like. So you can definitely now look for that in terms of upgrade paths in notes, okay?
And you mentioned Slack too. I think we help 2 to 3 partners every other week trying to upgrade to different versions.
Of course.
And we're all in there helping, trying to figure it out ourselves and following the guides. So definitely reach out.
Now, let me ask you another question. And I will say thank you, Whitney, for joining. Maybe I can also include you in this particular conversation, is that when you choose a particular build to leap to, because I know with Super Elite partners, you have not sometimes 5,000 devices, you may have 10,000, 15,000, or even more. We have partners with over 50. But it's one of those things where when you're doing these particular upgrades, when you're looking for the information, say you're on an older release, like 3 or 4 or 5 versions behind, because, hey, you've been busy or what have you. What are some of the other things that you're looking for in terms of success, right? Like, is it just features or is it just bugs? Like, what are some of the other things that you may be looking for? Is it performance? Like, can you describe that piece?
Yeah, so a lot of the times I'm looking out for features, right? I'm looking for those big version upgrades, but then I'm waiting for a few hot fixes to come out. to fix bugs that usually come along with those big versions. So I keep an eye out in the community. I talk a lot with head nerds, my success manager, support, to get a feel for how stable has this version become before I make that leap.
Right.
Because we have a lot of devices. It's a lot of work to get agents upgraded. And downtime, no matter how many devices you have, downtime is painful. So we just want to make sure that we're looking before we leave.
Of course, of course. And one of the reasons why I did want to bring you in, other than I've worked with you for probably close to a decade, is also that you're hosted in Central and you are a super elite partner. So can you tell me how the experience has been with, from going like on-prem, doing those upgrades on your own to, having Enable do them for you?
It's been really nice. I have a lot less worry overnight now. I used to be the one performing the upgrades, and then I got overnight staff and they would perform the upgrades, but I would always just wait up like for that call, like something went wrong, right?
Right. Well, we're technicians. We always expect something to go wrong. I mean, it is change management, so that does happen.
Exactly. I have a lot less worry now. We are kind of on in Central's maintenance window instead of our own, which is nice in a lot of ways, because now that call, if it comes, is going to come not during my sleeping hours.
Right.
And then plus I know that your application engineers are going to be already there, available. They know the upgrades are happening, so they're ready should problems occur.
Yeah, and we have a fleet of what we call DevOps engineers that are responsible for making sure that your NCOD is not only running, but running well. Anytime you guys want to reach out to myself, you have my email. It is into the GoToWebinar chat, letter J, MURPHY @n-able.com. Ask for Slack access. You can find me on Reddit as well. If you ever have a problem, something that you need, kind of immediate response for, you need a head nerd to kind of look into, you need to escalate something, I'm your guy. So, or I'm one of many head nerds, but you can also reach out to me. That's it for me today. Sebastian, any final thoughts?
No.
Okay. Everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. I really appreciate your attendance and look forward to seeing you on the next boot camp. And good luck with this sweepstakes. Thanks, everybody.